Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the different types of freedoms that we're talking about here. Because on this podcast, which is the Free Will, Science, and Religion podcast, obviously, we're refuting libertarian free will. We are refuting this idea that we choose things ex nihilo, that it's truly up to us, which we know is impossible because either it had to do with prior causes, which we believe, George and I do, or if somebody says that things happen for no reason, as some free willists do, that it's indeterministic, how can that be up to us either? Because it's just random. But what's confusing is that there's a lot of compatibilists who say that we have free will because if we're doing what we want to do. That's one form of compatibilism. They say, well, as long as you're doing what you want to do, then you're acting of your own free will. And then if somebody else makes you do something you don't want to do, well, then your will isn't free from them. But I think the distinction needs to be made that your will is not free in either case, because you can't will yourself to will something different than what you actually will. You can't like just change your desires in the way people might think you can. But even if somebody tries to discuss the freedom to do what we want, I've come to a recent observation that we're not able to do what we want to be doing most of the time. And perhaps I could start out with some examples, or if George would like to say something about it.
Well, Chandler, I just that that's a great introduction. I agree with you completely. To begin with, you're right. I mean, there's so much, in life that it's not what we want to do. So like, yeah, start just list some of these things so our audience gets an idea of like we're really not doing what we want to do.
Yeah, take for example the fact that we live in a society filled with all kinds of people, and we know that we have to do certain things. If we do something wrong that upsets somebody, they will punish us because they will get mad and blame us, because they believe in free will. And there's also the biggest example, though, that I think almost all adults can relate to is when you work your job, you don't work your job for the most part just because you want to do it. No, it's because you need the money. You need the money to buy food, pay your bills, have a place to live. And so it's not something that you are directly doing because you want. It's something that you have to do to survive. And that's a powerful example. But we can relate this to people who don't work jobs yet. We can relate this to children who have to go to school, and they don't want to go to school. Maybe there's a few of those nerdy kids who like it, and with the right teachers and the right subjects, yeah, it can be fun. But I get the feeling that a lot of kids don't like going to school. No, they would much rather be, playing outside or playing video games, or watching cartoons or something. It can't be that much fun to go to school. And when you look at how much of our time is spent going to school or working our jobs, or sleeping, because it's annoying, we have to sleep for about 8 hours, because we get tired. So these are a few examples about how we're not doing what we actually want to be doing most of the time. Instead, there's only narrow time frames between all these other things that other people make us do and our bodies make us do. We have to eat, we have to drink, we have to sleep, we have to go to the bathroom. And so both internally, our biology and needs of our bodies, as well as externally from all the peer pressure, and society standards and laws that other humans impose on us, both of those are constraining us from doing what we want to do. So I think that even our freedom to do what we want to be doing is so limited, and people need to realize this.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, like, if we take the average week, work, work day week, whatever, just, Monday through Friday, you're right. We're starting out with like 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work. That's 16 hours. You're right. And, some people may enjoy their jobs and all, but I think they'd prefer to not have to work if they didn't have to, whatever. It's not like they want to, that, people have to make a living. And then, you add to it, well, then they go home and they've got to cook dinner and do the dishes and then do laundry and then do paperwork. And then there's our social obligations. We need to call somebody back or write somebody or just there's, and if you're a parent, like a lot of times, for example, like, as adults, we wouldn't be maybe going to a circus or to the kind of movies that we take our kids to and stuff like that. So there's, so you're right. I think, like, of the 24 hours in the Monday through Friday days, then I would say at least 18, 19, 20 of them we're not doing what we really want to do. And then, yeah, fine, we get a bit of a respite on the weekend, for those 2 days. But your point is very clear. I mean, like, most, I think, of what we do in life, we do because situations, demand them of it. It's not like that we're doing what we actually want to do. It's like we're doing what we have to do because of our circumstances.
Yeah, it's very easy. I think, George, what's good about this example is that everyone can relate to this, because everybody can relate to that feeling of being relieved to get off work and being relieved that they're out of school or that they're done with their homework, or here's another fine example is like you mentioned about parents, parenting isn't easy. And kids demand so much time from parents that I think people really don't appreciate, the parents that stay home and raise their children while like, because some of them, they have a spouse that's able to go out and work a job and earn the money, but they're at home with the kids all day, especially when the kids are young, and people don't realize that that is just as much work, if not more, than the jobs people get paid for. And so somebody in that situation gets almost no time to do what they want. And I used to volunteer for respite night. It was a thing the church was doing that I was a part of, where we would play with the kids for 3 hours every fourth Saturday of the month. Just that means their parents got free babysitting because a bunch of volunteers were playing with their kids, and some of them were special needs kids. But that's just a powerful thing is, parents don't get much time to do what they want. And so I think everyone will be able to relate to this because it's an interesting question about, think about it. Um, how in control are you if you only get maybe 1 hour in a day to do what you want? And think about where all your time goes.
I hear you, and you're right about, like, like with housewives, mothers who stay at home and take care of their kids. Actually, according to the research, I've done a lot of research on happiness. The happiness level of mothers with young children, actually declines a lot. Those first years are so demanding, so tiring, so much effort goes into it that, clearly it takes their toll. So you're right. Like, people have, maybe 1 or 2 or whatever hours a day. And what do? A lot of times they're so tired from the rest of what they are doing that they'll sit in front of a TV and watch TV. And, according to the research, they're not all that content watching TV a lot of times. Between the commercials, which now take up half the show a lot of times, and, like, there was a research done a while back that showed that, like, the average mood of the average person watching the average sitcom television show was like mildly depressed. So obviously, like, for a lot of people, TV is, or the internet is something that they do But you got to wonder if it's really what they would rather be doing, what they really want to do, or if it's just like the best of possible circumstances or situations. But again, the stronger point, as you're saying, is like, that may be like a few hours a day at most. So like for compatibilists to assert that we have a free will because we're doing what we want to do. Well, basically there's very that's a small, very small segment of our lives.
Yeah.
That's
And when you look at it, if we were really as in control as a lot of people like to believe they are, we would not be that hindered. We would be doing what we want to do more of the time. And it also raises the question about, you know, how we do things that we don't really want to do just because we have a sense of feeling like that we should be doing them. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you like for example, you wanna watch a cartoon or play video games, but then you think, oh well, I really should finish this book that I've been reading. I should, like you ever have that feeling like, oh, I should be doing something productive. Have you ever had that nagging feeling like that?
it's a very common feeling, and it reflects another reason why we don't have a free will. That's somewhat a part of from the compatibilist notion, is that like we have this moral imperative, this imperative to do what we believe is the right thing to do. And like for many of us, it's like our society is so dysfunctional. We go through our days, our weeks, our lives thinking that well, I'm not doing enough, I should be doing more. A lot of people, I've talked to people who can't sit down and do nothing, can't sit down and be still and enjoy, because they feel they're neglecting something. And so like who knows how we got this very dysfunctional sense of over responsibility. But you're right. I mean, like this drive to constantly doing what we feel we're supposed to be doing, is pervasive, and yet another example of why we don't have free will.
Exactly, because you find that we have these feelings that there's certain things we should do, and so much of that, of course, obviously everything comes from some prior causes. People have told us certain things, like people, will say, oh well, you should be informed in what's going on in the world. So like for example, I took that advice and I started reading newspapers, and that was depressing. That didn't help. you know um, so yeah, I think that it shows us we have all these feelings of things that we're supposed to do, but it's not something that we want to do, which is like we feel like we should, and that's what's weird about it is there has to be a point in which we truly enjoy something and enjoy something that just brings us happiness doing it, but that isn't something that we feel that we have to do, that we have a duty to do it.
Yeah, I hear you. And again, like we have this powerful sense of needing to do things that in a lot of cases we don't really need to do. We just like we construct our lives where we just like burden ourselves with things, and part of it is like we believe that we need a lot of things to be happy, to feel happy, and to like that we really don't need. We kind of like here, especially like in some poor countries, then that's a different case. I think that they're basically doing what they need to do to survive. But in a lot of the richer countries, we just like fill our lives with just wanting more and more. And again, that locks us into needing to do more and more, that prevents us from doing what we truly want to do. There's an expression that says, well, first the person owns the money, and then the money owns the person. Meaning that, like when people make a lot of money and they like, let's say they buy an expensive house, an expensive car, well, all of a sudden, there's a mortgage on that house and the mortgage and expenses with the car and all, and they're locked into it. And so that they have to work to keep all those things. So they become, in a sense, slaves to these objects, to these things that they've gotten. And it's just another example of, all of a sudden, wait a minute, their life is really not theirs. They're not living a life based on, a free will to do what they want. They're living a life based on this sense of responsibility, of having to kind of like, conform to the life that they thought they that would bring them happiness. And unfortunately, a lot of times, more times that than not, doesn't. That compels them to do all these things they don't want to do. It's pervasive.
Yeah, it is interesting because it's like you said, people keep doing more and more and more, and they're never satisfied.
Yeah. So all right. So like this notion of compatibilist free will that says, like, we have a free will when we do what we want to do. It just like it fails because, like, because we're not doing what we want to do. But let's as long as we're addressing this, let's also take it a step further, that Schopenhauer said this. Fine, we may do what we want to do sometimes as we're exploring, but we can't want to do what we want to do. In other words, like, like it's not our free will to want to like, behave like, to let the let's say, we want to like eat a delicious meal, okay, and we might, say this is an example of our free will. But why do we want to eat that delicious meal? Because, that's, this is a part of us. This desire, this craving, this whatever just comes to us. We're not freely willing it. Or we might want to go to a movie, we might want to talk to a friend, whatever it is we might want to do. There are reasons, there are causes, there are drives that compel us to want those things. There are reasons. So again, this compatibilist notion of, free will because we're doing what we want. Not only does it fail because we're really not, throughout most of our days as we're exploring today, so much of our days we're doing what we don't. But even when we are doing what we want to do, it's not up to us. We're doing things that we're compelled by our biology, by our environment, by how we're conditioned by society.
That's the whole point because even though there are those times when we are doing what we want to do, it wasn't up to us that we ended up being the person who wanted to do it in the first place.
That's another point. Exactly. Because, like, let's say, yeah, let's say, like, by some kind of like strange magic, we were able to kind of like, you know, want to do the things we want to do, whatever, then, again, when we explore for the most fundamental, from the most fundamental aspect, did we create ourselves? Did we, create ourselves to be the kind of people who have whatever wants we want? And clearly, like, we didn't. It's like we're, for example, a computer doesn't want to do anything. A computer is programmed to do what it does. Similarly, we're programmed to want what we want. We're programmed to want what we want. So, like, just the fact that we didn't create ourselves, explains in another way why this notion of free will is just absurd. Why we simply don't have it. We can't have it.
Yeah, and here's another interesting case, Jordan, because we know that we're not able to just snap and change our desires anyway. We know we can't do that. But even if we could do that and say that people could change their food preferences and change their sexual preferences and change their religious beliefs just to snap in an instant magically, it would still not be up to them because their decision to change it to a different thing, there would be a cause for that which was not up to them. And their initial desires they had at the time, which they did not like, weren't up to them either. So even if we had this type of magical ability, which would be pretty close to free will, if we could actually change our desires to whatever we wanted, it would still we still would not be responsible for it even then.
Right, and that's why we say sometimes that the whole notion of free will is incoherent. It's internally inconsistent. In other words, like it doesn't make sense. If there's going to be a reason, let's take your example. So like we're given, we all of a sudden, like at any time in our life, we can want to think what we want. We can want to we can feel completely happy. Let's say we want to feel completely happy all the time. Very magically, we're able to do that. Even that wouldn't be a free will because we're not responsible for wanting to feel completely happy. We're not responsible. In other words, like even if we had this ability to just choose our thoughts completely on our own, well, we can't because there's reasons why we'd be choosing those, and those reasons, relate to our programming, to our drives, and we can't control those. In other words, like, and it's maybe more strongly, it's like what refutes that kind of free will is this principle of causality. So, you know, it's impossible to say that, well, we're choosing to feel, for example, very happy all the time of our free will because there's a cause for our choosing that, and then there's a cause for that, and there's a cause for that, and this chain of cause and effect leading up to our successfully choosing to feel happy all the time. These causes regress back to before we were even born. They regress, and once this chain of cause and effect regresses back to before we were born, then clearly what's not in our control, what's not in our free will, is making us then do things, do whatever it is or feel whatever it is that we end up feeling.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, because I would say that we would by definition love the ability to just make ourselves as happy as we wanted. I mean, that would be awesome. I mean, I have a feeling that we wouldn't even need to bother doing this show. We'd just be so blissed out if that were the case. It would even like that, it still wouldn't be up to us that we were a biological creature that was programmed to want to be happy. And I think the fact that we didn't create ourselves is a very powerful example. It's about authorship and realizing that none of us is actually the author of who we are or what we're doing.
Right, and more importantly, like you were saying before, we're not the authors of we're not the creators of ourselves. Like if we're gonna like want to do what we want to do because that's our nature, because that's how we were created. We're created to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So if we choose, and if we, magically were able to choose to quote unquote freely be happy all the time, even that wouldn't be free will because, like, again, we're designed that way by nature, by this evolution, by this process that created us. So, again, like, I mean, the concept, this notion of free will is mistaken on so many levels. If you concede compatibilism, as we were talking about before, then you realize, wait a minute, like so little of our lives are really, involved in doing what we want to do. But if you take it further, like we've been more recently, well, we don't choose to want to do what we want to do. And we don't create ourselves and all. So again, the whole notion of free will is just so flawed, so failed. And then that just leads to the question, how do people not get this? And again, we can't blame them, but it seems so clear, at least to you and me, to those of us who do this podcast, that free will is absolutely impossible. You have to kind of like wonder how some people are compelled to not be able to understand this really relatively simple truth.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's actually very simple once you understand it. Because It didn't take me that long to understand it once it was presented in the right way. Because some people, they are believing in a type of free will that some compatibilist has used, and it will be used in the sense of doing what you want. But I think what the conclusion that we're coming to is, first of all, our ability to do what we want is limited to a very limited time frame in each day. And there's all sorts of other things that prevent us from doing what we actually want to do. Like we've used the example, well, we want to lose weight, but there's reasons we can't. People would like to be able to believe certain things. They would like to be able to do certain things, but they just find that they can't do them. So there's so many limits on us doing what we want. But what we are trying to clarify to our audience is that even if we were able to do what we want 100% of the time, it would still not be up to us that we wanted to do those things.
Yeah, and let's go through it again. So like, we magically have this free will. We can do whatever we want any time of the day. We can feel however we want to feel. That's not free will. Why not? Because like of this principle of causality. In other words, there's a reason why we want to do what we end up doing. And fine, we're able to do it because we have this magical free will, but we don't have this free will because like this chain of cause and effect. In other words, we want to feel happy and we're feeling happy, but there's a cause for us feeling happy, and there's a cause to that cause, and there's that. In other words, you can't escape causality. This principle, this law of cause and effect, you know, pertains to, applies to everything we think, feel, say, and do. And if there's this chain of cause and effect is regressing back to before we were born, as I was saying before, that makes free will absolutely and irrevocably, I mean, like, it makes it completely impossible.
And here's an interesting thing, George. I hear people, I've read this in books, I've heard people say this, that people act as if they have a free will. And I disagree with it. I highly disagree with it because it doesn't even seem to make sense, because we basically do, for the most part, to the extent that other people aren't stopping us, we do what we want to do. And very rarely, if ever, do we, at least as far in my life, do we deliberate about something like, should I do this or should I do that other thing. It's for me, I analyze it as simply we do these like little pro con lists in our heads about the advantages of pleasure and pain, how these things are. But I view it as a math problem. I don't view it as some kind of 50-50 choice. Like, when I wake up in the morning, should I be kind or mean? Should I be honest or a liar? That doesn't happen.
Exactly. And to the extent it might in certain cases, you're right. We don't act as if we had free will. We act, as if we, understand that certain choices have consequences. Like if we do one thing, we expect that a certain thing will happen. Whereas if we do the exact opposite, we expect that something else will happen. So we act not according to this, like, as if we had a free will. We act according to our understanding that actions have consequences, that what we do will, we predict will lead to a certain outcome.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing about it, George. When we try to do something while believing it'll have a certain outcome, and then it actually causes a different outcome that's the opposite of what we wanted, we say, oh, I did the wrong thing. I made a mistake because this did not achieve the outcome I intended. And so it's a wrong in the sense of being incorrect from what we intended to do. The
I hear you.
effect.
Okay, Chandler, I see we're running out of time, so I guess we need to wrap this up.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs and George Ortega, and it's been a really good talk. A comparison between compatibilist type of freedom of doing what we want and the libertarian free will, which we understand we can't have because we're not the true author or the self causer of anything we do. It's all about causality. So yeah, I think this has been a good episode, and hopefully you've learned something. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.